It's going to accelerate, and then they're going to bring it back at full speed into that tunnel, 500 kilometers an hour.
Right now, China is testing a train so fast it could replace many airplane flights. A 700-kilometer-per-hour maglev train that floats above the track using powerful magnets. If it works, travel between major cities could take only 1 hour. But while China races into the future, the United States is still far behind in high-speed rail. The question is, how did this transportation gap become so big? The infrastructure empire China built in silence. Something extraordinary happened over the past 2 decades, and most of the world barely noticed. While other countries were still debating plans and budgets, China was already laying tracks, drilling tunnels, and raising bridges across some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. Quietly, steadily, and with enormous determination, it built the largest high-speed rail network in all of human history. Today, tens of thousands of kilometers of track stretch across the country, connecting cities that were once separated by long, exhausting journeys. A trip that used to take an entire day by road now takes just a few hours by train. Farmers, students, business people, and families all began moving faster, living differently, and thinking bigger about what was possible. But building this network was never just about convenience. It was about something much larger. Every kilometer of track laid was a lesson learned. Every bridge built was a problem solved. Chinese engineers were not just constructing infrastructure, they were building knowledge, experience, and confidence on a national scale. The government understood something powerful early on, that transportation is not just movement, it is the foundation of economic growth. Connect people faster, and trade accelerates. Connect cities closer, and opportunities multiply. The high-speed rail network became the backbone of a new China, one that moved with purpose and speed. But here's the part that most people miss completely. For the engineers and planners behind this system, high-speed rail was never the final destination. It was only the beginning. Every station built, every schedule optimized, and every passenger carried was quietly preparing the country for something far more ambitious. The tracks were a foundation, and on that foundation, something extraordinary was about to be built. China had learned how to move fast. Now it was ready to move faster than anyone had ever imagined, and the world was not paying close enough attention. The first experiment, Shanghai's floating train. To understand where China is going, you have to understand where it started, and it started with something that looked like magic. In 2004, a train opened in Shanghai that did not run on wheels in the traditional sense. It did not grind against metal rails or rumble across concrete. Instead, it floated, suspended above its track by the invisible but enormously powerful force of magnets. This was the Shanghai Maglev, one of the fastest passenger trains ever built and put into regular service anywhere on Earth. Travelers stepping onto the platform for the first time often did not know what to expect. Then, the train moved, and everything they thought they knew about ground transportation changed in an instant. There was no noise the way people expected, no heavy vibration beneath their feet. The train simply glided forward, picking up speed with a smoothness that felt almost unreal. Within minutes, the display inside the cabin showed something remarkable. The speed climbing past 300, past 400, settling above 430 kilometers per hour. Passengers looked out the window and watched the world outside blur into streaks of color. The technology behind this experience is called magnetic levitation. Powerful magnets built into both the train and the track create opposing forces, lifting the train slightly off the surface and propelling it forward without any physical contact. Without wheels touching rails, there is no friction in the traditional sense. And without friction, the biggest enemy of speed is dramatically reduced. What made this moment even more significant, however, was not just the speed or the silence. It was the knowledge China was quietly absorbing. The original system used foreign technology, developed with expertise from Germany, but China was watching, studying, and learning every detail of how it worked. The Shanghai Maglev was not just a train, it was a classroom, and China was an exceptionally dedicated student, already planning lessons that would go far beyond anything its teachers had imagined. The physics problem that stops every train. Once you remove friction from the equation, something incredible happens. The train moves faster, smoother, and more efficiently than anything built before it. Engineers celebrated, Passengers marveled, and for a moment, it seemed like the only limit left was imagination. But physics is not that generous, and it had one more obstacle waiting, an obstacle far harder to solve than grinding metal or vibrating tracks. That obstacle is air. At normal speeds, air is barely noticeable. A car drives through it, a train pushes past it, and neither machine suffers very much as a result. But as speed increases, everything changes. Air stops behaving like an invisible gas you can simply move through and starts behaving more like a wall you are constantly crashing into. The faster you go, the harder and more unforgiving that wall becomes. Here is what makes this problem so difficult to understand at first. Most people assume that if you double your speed, you roughly double the energy needed to maintain it. That feels logical, but it is completely wrong. The relationship between speed and air resistance does not grow in a straight line. It grows in a curve that bends sharply upward. Double your speed, and the resistance you face increases by 4 times. Triple your speed, and resistance increases by 9 times. Push a vehicle hard enough, and the energy required to fight the air around it becomes almost impossibly large. This is why even the most advanced high-speed trains in the world tend to operate within a certain range. Going beyond that range does not just require a better engine, it requires an entirely different way of thinking about the problem. The physics simply stop cooperating at a certain point, and traditional engineering approaches reach their natural limit. For years, this wall stopped every serious attempt to push ground transportation beyond what already existed, and the faster engineers tried to go, the harder the air pushed back, demanding a completely new solution that nobody had yet been bold enough to fully attempt. China's radical solution: remove the air. When you cannot fight a problem, sometimes the smartest move is to remove it entirely, and that is exactly what Chinese engineers decided to do. They had studied the physics, they understood the wall that air resistance created, and they came to a conclusion that was bold, unconventional, and surprisingly logical. If air was the enemy of speed, then the answer was simple: take the air away. The concept they developed was not entirely new in theory, but nobody had ever attempted it at this scale, or with this level of seriousness. The idea was to build long sealed tubes around the maglev track, tubes that would be carefully engineered to remove most of the air from inside, creating a low-pressure environment where a floating train could move with almost nothing pushing back against it. No air wall, no crushing resistance. No energy disappearing into the atmosphere around the vehicle. Inside these tubes, a maglev train would glide through conditions closer to what you might find at the edge of space than at ground level. The pressure inside would be reduced dramatically, thin enough to eliminate most resistance, but still safe and manageable for the systems operating within it. Combined with the already frictionless nature of magnetic levitation, the result would be something extraordinary, a vehicle with almost no physical force working against its forward motion. The numbers that emerge from this combination are genuinely difficult to believe at first. Speeds of 600, 650, even 700 kilometers per hour become not just possible but achievable within the known boundaries of engineering. Travel times that once seemed fixed and permanent begin to collapse. Cities that felt distant suddenly feel close, and the entire mental map of a country starts to reshape itself around what movement can now mean. This was not a small adjustment to existing technology. It was a fundamental reimagining of what ground transportation could be, and China was ready to build it. The tests that shocked the engineering world, ideas written on paper, are one thing, but turning them into machines that actually work, that actually move, that actually survive the enormous forces involved, that is something else entirely. China understood this, and rather than simply announcing a vision and waiting, it began testing, quietly and seriously, in facilities that most of the world knew very little about. For years, research teams at major Chinese universities and aerospace institutions built test tracks, developed prototype vehicles, and ran experiment after experiment in controlled low-pressure environments. The work was painstaking and deeply technical, involving not just the trains themselves, but the tubes, the magnetic systems, the pressure controls, and the safety mechanisms that would all need to function together perfectly at extreme speeds. Then the results began to emerge, and they were remarkable. In controlled tests, Maglev vehicles inside low-pressure tube environments reached speeds that placed them in a category entirely their own. Acceleration figures that once existed only in theoretical calculations became real, measurable, and repeatable. in one particularly striking test. A vehicle reached the equivalent of over 400 miles per hour in just 7 seconds, an acceleration record that stunned engineers who had spent careers studying high-speed transportation systems. What made these results significant was not just the numbers themselves, it was what the numbers proved. They proved that the technology had moved beyond the stage of imagination and into the stage of reality. The low-pressure tube concept was not a dream anymore. It was a functioning, testable, improvable system that engineers could get their hands on and push further. Each test revealed new information, new challenges, and new solutions. And China absorbed every lesson with the same quiet determination it had shown when building its original high-speed rail network. The engineering world was watching now, and what it was seeing was not a country experimenting carelessly. It was a country advancing with extraordinary precision toward a goal it had already decided to reach. Why China wants a 700 km per hour. Train speed is impressive on its own, but speed without purpose is just a spectacle. China is not building a 700 km per hour transportation system simply to break records or impress the world with a number. It is building it because that number, translated into time and distance, has the power to fundamentally transform how an entire country functions. To understand why, you have to think about geography. China is enormous, a country so large that even with one of the best high-speed rail networks ever built, many journeys still take several hours. The distance between Beijing and Shanghai, two of the country's most important cities, is roughly 1,200 kilometers. Today, the fastest high-speed trains cover that distance in around 4.5 hours, which is already impressive by almost any global standard. A flight takes around 2 hours, but that number does not include the time spent traveling to the airport, waiting, boarding, or collecting luggage on the other side. Now, consider what happens when a train covers that same distance in just over 1 hour. Suddenly, the comparison with flying shifts completely. The train wins not just on speed, but on convenience, comfort, and simplicity. No security lines, no luggage restrictions, no time spent 30,000 feet above the earth. Just a smooth, silent journey from city center to city center, faster than most people currently believe ground travel can go. But the impact goes far beyond the journey itself. When two major cities are only an hour apart, they begin to function differently in relation to each other. Businesses expand across both. Workers commute in ways that were previously unthinkable. Talent, ideas, and investment flow more freely. And the economic energy of two great cities begins to merge into something even more powerful. This is the real reason China wants this train, not the speed itself, but everything that speed makes possible across an entire nation. The strategic technology race. Behind every great infrastructure project, there is always a deeper story, and China's ultra-high-speed Maglev program is no exception. On the surface, it looks like a transportation project, but look closer, and something much larger comes into focus. This is a national technological mission, backed by the full weight of the Chinese state and driven by some of the most capable engineering institutions in the world. The program is not being run by a small startup chasing venture capital or a private company gambling on an unproven idea. It is led by major universities, aerospace contractors, and state-backed engineering firms that have spent decades accumulating expertise in materials, science, electromagnetics, propulsion, and systems engineering. These are organizations with deep resources, long planning horizons, and the kind of institutional patience that allows truly difficult problems to be solved properly. Billions of dollars have flowed into research facilities, test tracks, and prototype development, not in a single dramatic announcement, but steadily, consistently, over many years. This slow and deliberate investment strategy is part of what makes the program so formidable. It does not depend on short-term results or quarterly targets. It is built around a long-term vision that the government has committed to fully. What this means in practice is that setbacks do not stop the program. They simply become new problems to solve. Challenges that might cause a privately funded project to collapse are absorbed, studied, and overcome by teams that know the resources and support behind them are not disappearing. This turns the Maglev system into something far bigger than transportation infrastructure. It becomes a demonstration of what Chinese engineering and Chinese institutions are now capable of delivering, a signal to the rest of the world that the country's technological ambitions are serious, organized, and advancing with a momentum that is increasingly difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, in America, while China was laying foundations for the next era of transportation, something very different was unfolding on the other side of the world. The United States, a country that once led humanity in bold infrastructure achievement, was struggling with a problem that had no easy solution: the problem of standing still while others move forward. America's relationship with high-speed rail has always been complicated. The geography is vast, the population is spread differently than in Europe or Asia, and the political system makes large national infrastructure projects extraordinarily difficult to plan, fund, and execute consistently. Every ambitious proposal seems to encounter the same cycle: initial excitement, followed by funding debates, legal challenges, and years of delay that slowly drain momentum and public confidence. The most high-profile example is California's high-speed rail project, a system that was supposed to connect Los Angeles and San Francisco at genuine high speeds. After years of planning and billions of dollars spent, the project has been repeatedly scaled back. Its timeline stretched far beyond original estimates, its costs climbing steadily higher. Meanwhile, America's most visible answer to the question of future transportation was Hyperloop, a concept that generated enormous excitement when it first appeared. Private companies raced to develop it, headlines celebrated it, and for a moment, it seemed like the United States might leap directly into the next generation of transportation. But one by one, major Hyperloop companies ran into financial trouble, scaled back their ambitions, or shut down entirely. What remains is a gap, a visible and widening space between where American transportation infrastructure currently sits and where the most advanced systems in the world are rapidly heading. A gap that grows harder to close with every year that passes without decisive action. The global transportation shift. When a country successfully builds something that the rest of the world has never seen before, the consequences reach far beyond its own borders. If China completes and deploys its ultra-high-speed Maglev system at scale, the effects on global transportation, global industry, and global power could be profound, and they would arrive faster than most people currently expect. The most immediate impact would likely be felt in the aviation industry. Short-haul flights, journeys of 1 to 3 hours that currently fill regional airports and keep smaller airlines profitable, would suddenly face a competitor that is faster door-to-door, more comfortable, and potentially cheaper to operate. Airlines serving those routes would face pressure they have never encountered from ground transportation before, and some of those routes could simply disappear. Beyond aviation, the geopolitical implications are equally significant. Countries looking to modernize their own transportation networks would face a choice: develop their own technology independently, partner with existing Western suppliers, or adopt Chinese systems that are already proven, already deployed, and potentially offered with financing attached. For many developing nations, the economic logic of that third option could be very persuasive. Infrastructure leadership has historically carried enormous influence. The country whose technology powers another nation's railways, ports, and transit systems builds relationships, dependencies, and leverage that extend well beyond the transportation sector itself. If Chinese maglev technology becomes the global standard, the strategic implications compound over decades. Even industries far removed from passenger travel could feel the shift. Cargo logistics, military mobility planning, and advanced launch system concepts all intersect with the core technologies being developed inside China's Maglev program, meaning the ripple effects of success could spread through sectors that few people are currently watching closely enough. The 2026 moment. Every great technological story has a turning point, a moment when everything that was once theoretical becomes undeniably real. For China's ultra-high-speed Maglev program, that moment may be approaching faster than most of the world realizes, and the year 2026 is shaping up to be extraordinarily significant. By that point, new test tracks that have been under development for several years are expected to become fully operational. These are not small experimental loops or modest research facilities. They are serious, large-scale infrastructure built specifically to push prototype vehicles to their absolute limits under real-world conditions. Every kilometer of those tracks represents years of planning, engineering, and quiet determination, finally arriving at a moment of visible proof. Full-scale prototype vehicles are also expected to reach a much more refined stage by this period. The early experimental models that proved the core concept's work will have been studied, improved, and rebuilt with the lessons of hundreds of tests absorbed into every system. What emerges from that process will be something significantly closer to a machine that could actually carry passengers, not just demonstrate a principle. Perhaps most significantly, demonstration systems visible to the public and to international observers could begin appearing around this time. Physical evidence that the program has moved from research into something that looks unmistakably like deployment preparation. What makes 2026 particularly important is the signal it would send to the rest of the world. A successful public demonstration at genuine ultra-high speeds would not just be a domestic achievement, it would be a global announcement. A clear statement that the next era of ground transportation has arrived, that it works, and that one country got there first while others were still debating whether it was even possible. The moment is coming, and the world would be wise to pay attention. As the future of travel. For most of human history, the story of speed has followed a simple and familiar pattern. Each generation found a way to move a little faster than the one before it, from horses to steam engines, from propeller aircraft to jets, from early railways to high-speed trains. Every leap forward reshaped economies, redrew maps of opportunity, and changed what ordinary people believed was possible in their daily lives. But something different is happening now. Something that feels less like the next step in a familiar progression, and more like the beginning of an entirely new chapter. Ground transportation is approaching a threshold where the oldest assumption in travel, that flying is always faster for long distances, may no longer hold true. When a train can travel 700 kilometers per hour through a low-pressure tube, gliding silently between city centers without security lines, luggage delays, or the exhausting rituals of modern air travel, the calculation changes completely, and it changes for hundreds of millions of people at once. The country that builds this system first does not just win a transportation race, it earns the ability to define the standards, shape the technology, and influence how the rest of the world chooses to move for generations to come. That kind of leadership, once established, is extraordinarily difficult for others to overcome. China has spent decades building toward this moment, laying tracks, floating trains, sealing tubes, removing air, and solving problems that stopped everyone else. The investment has been enormous, the patience has been remarkable, and the progress has been real. The future of travel is being built right now. Not in an airport, not on a launch pad, but on the ground, inside a sealed tube, carried forward by magnets and momentum and the unstoppable ambition of a country that decided to move faster than the world thought possible.